is Vicki Samaritano, and I'm one of the co-directors of these roundtables along with Trevor Gatsuma. And we are both so glad to have you here with us tonight. And particularly if this is your first time joining us, we are so grateful that you have entrusted this evening to us. We know that you could be doing a lot of other things. We began these roundtables back in 2018 with a vision to bring together faculty, staff, clergy, and special guests from different universities in the city to have conversations over dinner around the intersection of science, on religion and philosophy, and to intentionally place people around tables from different disciplines, belief systems, faith traditions, both religious and secular, so our lives could be enriched, our thinking could be challenged, and bridges could be built. That's easy enough, right? Real easy. Well, I have to say that this experience has been an absolute joy for both of us. And I've been so encouraged by the feedback that I've gotten from you all. And as I've said before, seeing meaningful connections being made and strategic collaborations taking place, and to truly observe people really listening to one another and being gracious and kind to one another, even if they completely disagree. That's been beautiful to see. You all have proven that it's possible to have these types of conversations. And I went to bed last night and I thought about this last roundtable that we had, and some of you were with us. You might recall that we had a terrible storm that night, I think. Isn't that right? It was terrible. I mean, everybody was walking in. They were completely drenched from head to toe. People's umbrellas were literally, falling over with tons of rain. And there was a stream outside of the faculty house. And frankly, I was so impressed by the tenacity that it took for people to actually show up. I really was so impressed by that. And I thought about the hard work that it took to get there. It spoke volumes on many different levels that people actually took the time to be there. And I don't think it had anything to do with the food. I really don't. We were in the middle of a storm and people actually showed up. And we are both literally, as we know, some of our friends around the country are in and have been in the middle of a storm. In our American culture and in our world, the pain around us, and no doubt in this room, is palpable. It really is. And I say this because I really believe that showing up tonight is a way for us to be agents of reconciliation and restoration. And as we build bridges across divides, as we seek to understand one another and show compassion and intellectual humility around these tables, I really believe that we're modeling the kind of society that I think we want to be, right? And particularly as we discuss this topic, which I believe we're all on the edge of our seats wanting to do so. And so that being said, let's get to it, shall we? So let me introduce our distinguished moderator. I believe she's over in this corner. And she will frame our conversation tonight. Her name is Miss Niala Boodhoo. And Niala is a journalist for Axios, and she has a background in podcasting and public media. And you can hear her every Friday on NPR on the IA show. Is that right? The 1A show. The 1A show. You can hear her most Fridays on NPR. And Niala, thank you so much for being with us here today. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you to begin that conversation.
So, hi everyone. I'm Niala Boodhoo. Thank you so much for having me here. And it is so wonderful to be in this room. And I've already had such interesting conversations. And I know that those will continue for the rest of this evening. Tonight, we have a really interesting topic ahead of us as we're talking about AI. In particular, as we're thinking about the role of faith and religion and values when we think about artificial intelligence. And as I was thinking about preparing for this evening, I was thinking back, I live in Washington, D.C., so this is probably a very Axios thing to say, but I was thinking about Sam Altman's congressional testimony last year. And I don't know if you all remember that, but it's not often that big tech, well, he's not big tech, but like the tech goes to Washington and says, please regulate us because we are concerned about the dangers that our technology poses. And in events I've done in Silicon Valley, in conversations I've had with so many people within the AI community, I hear from them over and over, we don't want to be like social media. We don't want to replicate what we think has happened with social media. And when you hear people like Sam Altman talk about the potential for AI to create like novel pathogens as biological weapons or to be used to take over governmental systems, you understand some of the harms. But in conversations I've had with other people like Fei Li at Stanford, who's considered like the godmother of AI, she's much more concerned about more mundane but equally destructive concerns about artificial intelligence being used to exclude people who are already systematically excluded, including communities of color or marginalized groups or those in poverty, especially as we talk about artificial intelligence and jobs in the labor force. And while we think about this conversation this evening and we think about other places like the EU that have introduced regulatory frameworks to govern AI, the US has not done that. Although sort of the argument is that it's coming and that we have existing laws that already apply. And so I thought it was important to start with that, with the legal framework or the lack thereof, because I think that lends urgency to the conversation about a moral framework around artificial intelligence and whose responsibility it is to create those and what values we bring to that. So we're going to be talking about all different kinds of artificial intelligence tonight, not just ChatGPT or other forms of generative AI, but I thought it would be important for us to start with a definition. So my news organization, Axios, uses the definition of AI, of thinking of it as the term that was coined in the 1950s by John McCarthy that describes efforts to develop machines that could reason and solve problems in human ways, or human-like ways. So now, of course, we use artificial intelligence as a term that can be widely applied to any software that can identify patterns in data. So with that said, we've already been enjoying our food. How this evening, the rest of the evening is going to work is our two guests, Pascal Wallisch and John Kim, who I'm about to introduce, have some opening remarks to set our conversation. Then we are going to have our own discussion, and then that will lead into the roundtable discussions that you all will have. And then we'll come back to have some audience and conversation together. So let me introduce our two lead conversationalists that we have this evening. John Kim is a managing member of Karamaan Group, which is an investing firm that takes passive and active interests. On the active side, he's a strategic advisor to WiseRock Software, which is a provider of intelligence amplification software. He received his PhD from MIT in 1998 and his AB from Harvard in 1995. John and his family reside at Coram Deo, a house of worship, prayer, and entrepreneurship located in Midtown Manhattan. And he's also part of a monastic community called the Order of the Common Life. Pascal Wallisch is a professor of data science and neuroscience at NYU. He received his PhD from the University of Chicago and a postdoctoral fellowship at NYU's Center for Neuroscience. He has received the Golden Dozen and Teach Tech Awards for his teaching at NYU, as well as a Booth Prize for excellence in teaching for his teaching in Chicago. And one of his main research questions is, how do people construct the subjective reality they inhabit, which I think is a perfect intro to this conversation. So let me turn it over to you gentlemen to start. John, you're gonna start, kick us off, right?
Can I just get a show of hands? Who here has used ChatGPT, Bard, or one of the various? Okay, so pretty much everyone here. And how many of you have had a moment where you were just like, oh my gosh, what did it just do? Like, how did it just give me that response? Okay, so, and that's why we're all here, because I will say that I just have a couple brief slides for what I want to say. I think Gen AI is the most consequential technical development since the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project is obviously memorialized in the film Oppenheimer, which basically led to the creation of the nuclear bomb and nuclear energy. I think Gen AI is on that order in terms of what it means for us as a society. Let me just start. Gen AI is really nothing more than software, okay? Now, Marc Andreessen, who's a very well-known venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, he was actually one of the original creators of the Netscape browser. Some of you in this room might be old enough to remember that. It was in 1995 when the internet was birthed, and Marc Andreessen was a wonder boy from a company called Netscape, and he's still around. And he wrote a paper in 2011 titled "Software is Eating the World." What did he mean by that? Basically, what that meant was there's no part of human life today that is not somehow being mediated by software. We live in these phones. You probably ordered an Uber to get here. When you need to get a flight, when you need to shop on Amazon, almost all interactions, even your social interactions, are mediated through social media. Software is at the center of almost every aspect of daily life. Software companies are the most valuable companies in the world. The people who run these companies are the richest people in the world and amongst the most powerful. Software is eating the world. Gen AI is consuming software. So the way to picture this is you have a medium-sized fish eating all the plankton, and the medium-sized fish is software. In the world, there's all this plankton, and then you have this humongous fish over here, which is Gen AI, that is consuming software. And then, obviously, by the transitive property, Gen AI, therefore, is eating the world. And that's why we're all here, because we're all probably thinking about this, and we're all probably somewhat concerned about this. I just want to give a brief level set here on what this technology is and why it's so important. So LLMs, large language models, which is basically Bard, ChatGPT, Llama, Claude, these are all based actually on somewhat simple rules of high school calculus and linear algebra. I suggest that everyone in this room could easily understand the underlying mathematics of what makes these huge large language models. So why are they so amazing? So here's what's happening. When they operate at scale, when they're trained with the entire epic that is the internet, when they have compute power, the likes of which has never been witnessed before, applied to training these models, a deeper property has clearly emerged. LLMs are basically, the way I put it is this: they're capturing the manner in which knowledge is encoded in language. So you have, like, knowledge is what's out there. Language is a mechanism by which we encode knowledge. And these LLMs are uncovering the underlying structure. That's why when I was telling our table here, somebody sent me a white paper for an innovation, a new battery that could literally revolutionize the world. And I read the white paper and I understood about 10% of it. And then I sat down with ChatGPT and a few other LLMs. I fed it the paper and I started interrogating the chatbot to help explain to me what the heck this paper is saying. And it was as if my best friends who know me, who know physics, who know quantum mechanics, and also know this topic, was able to explain to me in an incredibly personalized and powerful way what the heck this paper was saying. That's only possible because these LLMs are essentially uncovering the manner in which knowledge is encoded in language. So I'm a businessman. I've been starting companies ever since I was 25 years old, doing my PhD at MIT. So I think a lot about the economic implications. So the most important economic implication, I think, is what happens when LLMs can perform the tasks that most knowledge workers do today. I think there are some doctors in the room. Not to freak you out, but there will come a day when I think an LLM will be better at diagnosing and recommending a health trajectory than even the finest physician. So in the same way that during the Industrial Revolution, human labor, physical manual labor was replaced by machines, we are not that far away from a day when I believe LLMs will be trained in a way where it will be able to apply a whole corpus of knowledge for each given field to the problems at hand in that field for that day, which is essentially the job of knowledge workers. Finally, I just want to conclude my remarks with this. So I want to ask a question: who controls this technology? Who controls Manhattan Project, nuclear weapons, largely controlled by governments, right? Gen AI is controlled by corporations. Now, I think Niala made the comment before, ChatGPT is not big tech. That's actually somewhat true, but not exactly true, because actually Microsoft is a controlling shareholder in OpenAI. The second most popular LLM today is probably Llama, which has been put out there by Facebook. Google controls Gemini, and Claude is controlled by Anthropic, which is actually effectively controlled by Google and Amazon. So why am I bringing this up? Because when we want to think about the implications of AI for society, we don't have to look too far. We just have to look at the recent history of big tech. When Google was founded, who here remembers what Google's motto was? Don't be evil. When Facebook was founded, what was Facebook's mission statement? Anyone remember?
Connectivity.
Yes, to connect the world, to bring people together, and to connect the world. What happened? What happened with that? Well, I'll tell you what happened. Facebook was a hostage to what they called the engagement maximization algorithm. It turns out that if you want to maximize people's engagement with Facebook, here's what you need to do. You need to literally separate people into their individual echo chambers. And that's precisely what Facebook did. That's how they became a trillion-dollar company. So even though their mission was to essentially make the world smaller, connect people, and bring the world closer together, it didn't take long for the logic of Facebook as a publicly traded company to result in being a hostage to the engagement maximization algorithm and basically making the world, dividing the world. And similarly with Google. So we don't have to look too far in the past to start asking questions. Collectively, the folks in this room need to be asking the questions: how should we think about this technology? What does it mean for the kind of society that we want to live in? And most importantly, what are the implications for human dignity? Thank you.
All right, so first of all, thank you, John. That was a wonderful framing of this debate, because as you will see in a moment, my slides are basically going to be footnotes to the big issues that you raised. I also want to thank the audience for coming out today at these rectangular tables, and for Vicky and Trevor to make this happen at short notice. As you know, the event was in danger of being canceled altogether. So thank you for bearing with us here in the improvised, with the Bora cable, right? Let me make it happen. Anyway,
Spectrum.
Yes, Spectrum. Thanks for Spectrum. Anyway, so let me see what I can do here. First of all, I want to say that this is unbelievably timely.
Yes.
So yesterday, let me check who won the Physics Nobel Prize. And I almost fell out of my chair when I saw that it was Hopfield and Hinton, who, certainly deserving computer scientists, but physics? The physics people, it's hard to tell what's going on Twitter. People say physics is imperial. They're like claiming AI as a branch of physics. Other people are saying, no, you physicists have been buying into string theory for 50 years and it's gone nowhere. So basically there was no physics Nobel Prize this year. We had to give it to AI instead.
Right.
But I was like, maybe a one-off. Then today, this morning, I was like, let me check who won the chemistry Nobel Prize. And I was like, you can't be serious. I'm not sure if you guys know these people, but this, for instance, Demis Hassab is of DeepMind, Google DeepMind, of AlphaGo fame. Yes. And basically, they gave it for reinforcement learning. Mm-hmm. Now, in fairness, they solved a hard problem in chemistry, I guess, organic chemistry, which is how to reconstruct the three-dimensional structure from a structural equation, which you basically have to do with AI, I guess. But they did it. Oh, and look at that. And I promise you, I swear to you, I did not. I did not coordinate with John. So there's maybe some insight here if there's like commonalities. But note, however, I'm saying machine learning. I'm not saying AI.
Yes.
That's going to become important in a moment. But let's talk about the threats to dignity. So the first threat that everybody obviously has in their mind is, the Terminator, right? AI threatens your dignity because it will like kill you or enslave you. So yes, they will not leave much of your dignity intact. Yes. Let me just enumerate them before we're going to go to assess them. Another concern would be the Wall-E world, where there's not much left to do. I mean, intelligent machines are going to do all the work, and all that's left for you is to become this blob and consume. And most of you are professors here. You're probably already seeing your students adopting this stance when the chatbot can write the code and write the paper and do the assignment frankly. So that's another. Sorry, something just happened. How are we doing with the audio? Okay. Anyway, so then there's some metaphysical threats, I would say. And one would be, well, how do I say this? We attribute dignity. I actually checked the.
Microphone up, just
up. Yeah. Are you sure up? Because it sounds okay. You want me to eat the mic? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Always better to eat the mic.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so I actually, on the occasion of this event, looked up the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the UN in 1948. And they do talk a lot about dignity. And one of the ideas is that every human being, by virtue of being human, has this inherent dignity because they're a sentient, conscious, rational agent. Well, what if your AI claims that? Is there a soul inside? Would you... basically, it devalues, it threatens directly the dignity we extend to you because, for reasons you will see in a moment, we might not grant that to linear algebra. If this is the first hand, the other hand would be very soon these machines will walk around and you might attribute, look at that, look at this robot looks at you. By the way, all of these all the images I'm using today were made with generative AI. Yeah. So it does look like it has a soul, doesn't it? Yes. Or emotions. Yes. So this is going to be very quickly become a two-side street. Your having a soul and this dignity will be threatened, and the robots will claim it. So we urgently need to have this discussion that John raised before this becomes a thing, before it becomes real. All right. But I do want to spend 1 minute on talking about what we mean by intelligence in artificial intelligence. As John said, the heart of all of this is the dot product. Yes. Lots of dot product, by the way, this is what's called a neuron. It's an abstraction. It's a summer. You have these inputs, x1, x2, x3, and dot, dot, dot. I should put in dot, dot, dots, and weights, and these are multiplied. And by the way, there's trillions of these now in modern models. Correct. So, but in other words, you have dot products at scale, stacked dot products at the heart of it. Yes. All right. But it's basic linear algebra. It comes up in the first week of a linear algebra course. All right. So where do these inputs come from? And and then every of these units computes an output from a dot product. Anyway, so where do these inputs come from? Basically, I would have to say it's human knowledge. Yes. As John said, they fed the entirety of the internet into this. That's what the X's are. Yep. Then you could say, hey, Pascal, who sets the weights? Well, this is called reinforcement learning. It's been known for a long time in the animal kingdom, like developmental psychology, training a toddler, basically with reward and punishment. Like how do you punish a robot? You give it negative feedback or you give it positive feedback. And so basically and by the way, these are humans, human feedback. They are setting these weights. And that over time, so with a gigantic corpus of human knowledge and lots of feedback from humans, these emergent properties do emerge. I do want to just say one thing though. In the 1840s, the linear algebra was, the thought product was created by research in the mathematics of linear algebra. This is the human knowledge, and this is human reinforcement learning. So as far as I can tell, this is a collator of human intelligence. Yes. All right. Now I want to say, and this is something that John also already mentioned, this has a long history. It's not the first. So I see this more as like a human effort aggregator. Yeah. There's a long history of this. So for instance, when cities were invented, they became a transformational thing, like stars, like gravity. People can talk, people can exchange ideas, people can do that. A corporation, that's a way to pull capital. The stock market is a way to get valuation signals together, and you have a market. You have a fair relation. Ask John for the details. He has a PhD in economics from MIT. Elections, it's a way to integrate the political will of a nation. Wikipedia, it's integrated with knowledge. And basically, so the way I see it, it's not AI. It is not AI. It's a human effort, in this case, cognition, I guess, integrator. But in all of these integrators, there was emergent properties, like a star. City's best example. There's things happening in cities that just don't happen in the countryside, where there's not enough people.
Yes.
All right. And I do want to say, however, and this is why I would not be able to attribute, Pascal, would not be able to attribute this soulfulness to the machine. It's basically just linear algebra. And let me just tell you why I'm saying that. So first of all, and I'm going to share the next slide in a moment, I call this the tyranny of the training set. If it's not in the training set, and this is, I'm saying, current machine learning approaches. This might change in the future, but by the way, I'm not criticizing other people. We're doing this. I'm at the Center for Data Science at NYU, so I'm criticizing myself. But the way we're doing it right now, and I'm saying machine learning, if it's not in training set, we can't do it. Which, by the way, of course, has lots of, this is something you raised, Niala, a lot of backlash from, say, the artist community. The artists didn't consent, and the journalists, by the way, did not consent for all the articles and all the art to be in the training set, to my knowledge. Then, how do I say this? I know this can be augmented with RAGs and things like that, but usually if you ask the chatbot to design a speech, I could ask chatbot to design this speech. It would have been full of generalities, not specific to what we're talking here. And frankly, is anyone here on YouTube and you're watching videos? There's now a flood of AI-generated, AI-voiced videos, and frankly, I think the reaction of the audience is, this is just AI. Even if the voice is technically good, it does not have a German accent like I do. It's too slick, it's too smooth. And people are like, yeah, this is just AI. I don't want to listen to it anymore. So it doesn't have character, it doesn't have authenticity. So I'm starting to embrace my German heritage and like lean into the accent, because it at least gives me some authenticity. And this is something we talked about earlier on the table. How do you catch your students using ChatGPT? Well, the chatbot just confidently makes stuff all the time, and it does not know which is which. That's how it works. So it will attribute my textbook to Jeffrey Hinton, for instance, because that's the biggest guy in the field, and it makes sense. But that's not true. And that's, by the way, inherent. You cannot get rid of hallucinations with the way we're doing it right now. How do I say this? You, John, all of you, can learn as a human from a single example. It's amazing, actually. It's unbelievable how much humans can learn from one instance. But that's not true for these AI models, if you want to call them AI, machine learning. You need so much data that the companies have now started to create their own synthetic data. What could go wrong? I have many concerns about this. But it's basically, you don't learn by me showing you 100 million examples of something and I ask you a question about it. I teach you the principles, but right now, you can't do that. The training is even worse. If I say, hey, let's play a game, but then the rules change, you can adapt very quickly to that. AI cannot. I think it took OpenAI like a year to train the latest version, something like that. It takes a long time. So it's not adaptable. So we've taken this together, and by the way, it doesn't live in the world. It's all, have you heard as an undergraduate, correlation is not causation? Have you heard that? Well, the chatbot has also heard that, because it's all, dot products are correlations. So basically, there's no causal understanding of anything. It doesn't have a model of the world. It's basically, there's this old philosophical thought experiment of Mary, the color scientist who lives in a box, has read every color vision paper, but has never seen color before. That's what the bot is. The bot has read all the papers, but it has not lived in the real world. So it doesn't actually understand. Taking all this together, I would argue, maybe it's just a very well-trained parrot. Like, it doesn't actually understand anything. It can just mimic it very well. For all these reasons, I'm not concerned about the Terminator, because we're going to outperform it by adapting more quickly to the threat environment. I'm also not concerned about the soul thingness, because again, it's just linear algebra, dot products. But I am concerned about the last one, which is the Wall-E world. Let me show you why. Oh, let me just first show you one more slide about the tyranny of the training set. I asked for my class, I want to show the students my class is on principles. You might have all these random facts, but they're deeply connected by some principles. Right? So I asked Dali and others, Midjourney, to make an image of two icebergs with peaks far from each other, but are connected beneath the waterline. Sea, I misspelled that. Nothing else in sight. That's what he made, yes? And so that's not what I was looking for, yes? It gets the idea a little bit, but they're not far apart. They're right next to each other. So I couldn't use that. So I said, let's try again. And it made this one, right? It doesn't get it. There is nothing in the training set. And I said, okay, let's try to make an image of an iceberg with two peaks that are emerging from beneath the waterline. Calm, see, nothing else in sight. So there was no image of an iceberg with two peaks in the training set. It can't do it. And I challenge you to do this yourself. There's only 3 examples. I tried 100 times and I just eventually gave up. It can't be done. But I could ask an artist, make me that, and they could do that immediately. You know? So, yeah, I have many doubts about this journey of the training set. If it's in the training set, like Niala's articles, I can ask the chatbot to write in the side of Niala. A student trained an LLM on me and my voice, and it sings in my voice, just from public data. If it's in training set, it can do it. All right, and so on. Anyways, but there's the worry. AIs, for many years now, let me show you what's going on here. These are different, like, popular chess engines, Stockfish, for instance, AlphaZero, and this is the ELO rating. 3,600, 3,800, this is time. Does anyone here know the best human performance? Magnus Carlsen, what ELO does he have? Anybody? About. What's Magnus Carlsen's ELO? Roughly. Any idea? There's no way. You're all professors. You're just shy. Say that again? 2950, but it gets close. Is there any chance that someone who says 2950 ever wins against someone with 3,600, 3,700? Is there any chance they will ever win a single game?
No.
Never. That's correct. The last time the best human has won against the best chess engine is decades in the past. That will never happen again. Same thing is true for Go and all of that. So the question is, Pascal, if you're not worried about the Terminator, why does this not worry you? And the answer is, and I'm going to show you the next slide, in these games, it's very easy to keep score, so you don't need human feedback to train the weights. The chess engines or the AI can play each other, and even if the human doesn't know what's going on, there's a score. Chess there's a score. You win or you lose. All right, but for anything else, if you look here, image classification, reading comprehension, English language understanding, visual reasoning, multitask language understanding, math, what do you notice what's happening over time? This is on X's time again. This is the human baseline. This is the average human. What do you notice about his performance? What do you notice? Anybody? Why? Or I'll say why. But yeah, it asymptotes. And it asymptotes because I'm not worried about superhuman performance because the human has to train this thing. Who are these people that are going to give it superhuman performance, right? So I'm not worried about that. However, there is a concern, which is, does anyone here know? I'll just tell you in the interest of time, how OpenAI went from ChatGPT 3.5 to 0.1, which is currently is. And the answer is what humans are doing the training. So there's no new secret sauce as far as I can tell. But I think they spent $1 billion training the new model. And let me tell you what happened. The first one was literally trained by people in Nigeria for very little money. So Nigerians said, this response is better than that response, ad nauseum, for many, many months. And they were paid pennies on the dollar, all right? And that's why, by the way, if you were wondering why your students use Delph so much in their papers, it's much more common in Nigerian English than in American or British English, all right? Which, by the way, is also ties both to Niala's point and John's point. That's where the bias comes in. Because if the people who train the model have biases, that's how you get a bias into the model. But anyway, they went to this by the new one, which just came out, which, by the way, outperforms most PhD scientists, was trained by PhD scientists, professors. They told professors, yeah, I'm almost, that's my last slide. They told professors, we're going to give you $250 an hour if you do the reinforcement learning, which now means if you're not among the best humans, you might not have a job because the bot is now going to outperform 95% of the people. That's it. All right, sorry.
So I'm going to try to truncate our conversation here so we have time for our table conversations as well. But I want to start with something that both of you brought up, which was human dignity. And I want to ask you first how you're defining human dignity, but then how you think human dignity changes in light of everything that you're saying. And both of you, it seems like you're going to disagree on this, but let's see. John, you want to start?
Sure. So I come from the Orthodox Christian tradition. I think even the phrase human dignity implies some shared notion of what it means to be human, what it means for a human being to flourish and to live out its ultimate purpose, shall we say. And so I think when I think about AI, I think that's part of the reason I highlighted the fact that, and a point that Pascal reinforced, it is almost more likely than not that most white-collar jobs today can be replaced by Gen AI. Now, a part of me wants to be somewhat optimistic and just say, well, creative destruction, Schumpeterian creative destruction is the way that economies grow, and we'll just have other ways for people to do things. Maybe, but I think that working is about way more than a paycheck. And so I think the idea that Gen AI that is controlled by a small number of parties can now do the work that millions of people are doing today, thus rendering them. And that's why I think it was Andrew Yang in 2020 offered the idea of universal basic income as a policy prescription for the fact that machine learning and Gen AI is going to render so many people unemployed. And I appreciate the heart behind that, but I think there's something fundamental about being human that means working is about more than just getting paid. And so if you just give someone money, but they're not actually doing anything that is productive and recognized, whether it's in the marketplace or otherwise, I think that actually robs us of our dignity. And so I come at this from the perspective that we first have to define, and we need some sort of underlying spirituality or philosophy, whatever you want to call it, to define what we mean by human flourishing. And then we need to have adult conversations as a society about what that means from a policy perspective and what the implications of that are for how we want to try to live together.
To follow up on that, but I don't think we disagree about that at all. Okay. But let's find out. So to follow up on that, so just to be clear, I think if you're the best programmer or the best doctor, your job is safe. You're going to be okay. If it is second best, it's also safe because you're going to be training the AI to do better. But if you're the average knowledge worker, average coder, yeah, your job is not safe. So I think if you tie your dignity to, or writers.
I was going to say they're average journalists.
Yeah, I was going to say the best writers are going to be okay. But if your skill set is to make a listicle for BuzzFeed, we just became obsolete. If that's the extent of your skill set. Mm-hmm. So I guess the key will be to unbundle your dignity from your work, because as John just said, for most people their work gives them a lot of meaning, I would argue, and I would think that meaning will have to come from, for most people, from somewhere else. Maybe new ways of living together, new values, new religions, new metaphysics. But I don't think for most people it will come from the work, because there will be no work. And I do disagree with people who say, oh, it's going to be, like you said, like, oh, there's going to be new jobs. Maybe this time it's going to be different, because what are these people going to do? Servants maybe, but the robot can do that too.
So maybe just a slight disagreement, because I generally agree with a lot of things Pascal's saying. So I believe that there is dignity in work, and it is a necessary part of the creation story in Genesis 1. Again, and I take my bearings from the Orthodox Christian tradition. The Christian story begins with man being created, and the first thing that God told him to do is he put him into the garden and he told him to work it. And in some sense, for me, that's a metaphor for every vocation that is in this room right now, and that has been ever since, is that our job is to tend to a garden. That garden for many people here is the classroom, is the students. There are physicians in here, but I think that is fundamental to human dignity, and I would not be, I'm fearful and anxious about a world that Pascal just described, where there's very few things for people to do.
If I may follow up on that,
Yes.
Just to clarify, I agree with you that work, that's actually what I usually say when students ask me. The best thing you can hope for in this world, in my opinion, is to do meaningful work, important work on something that is worth doing. That's pretty much it. Everything else is ephemeral. But that raises the problem, what if there's nothing left to do for most people? I think the idea would be that we untie work from paid work. It will not be paid because the bot will do it cheaper, better, more efficient. But maybe you can, like you said, have your own garden or something like that. I think you will have to, because I agree with you. In a former life, it's going to sound crazy, it's true. In a former life, I used to be a neuroscientist, and yeah, people are not going to do well in this Wall-E world where they're just sitting around doing nothing. I can't imagine the depression rate would skyrocket, suicides, it would be terrible. So I agree with you.
So we've been talking about the future. I want to bring this back to right now. And as we're thinking about the different dangers that both of you have highlighted, whether it is future dangers with artificial intelligence, or even to your point, different biases within what we're training right now. Does faith provide a structure for morality in AI that has so far been missing in technology? And if it's not faith, who or what can or should? Who wants to go first?
That's like the deepest question that anyone has posed. I mean, it really, we're witnesses to what happens when we allow the quote free market. Like, look, as Niala said, I did my PhD in economics at MIT. I was around libertarians. We worship the market. And there's probably some good reasons to think highly of the market as a mechanism for resource allocation and coordinating collective action. However, we know exactly what happens when we leave the development of social media to the free market. That was what I just articulated a few moments ago. No matter what they say in their mission statements, the reality is that the profit motive wins.
Which they changed their mission statements.
And then they just change them ex post when nobody's looking. Should we have a regulatory framework? I don't know about you guys. I've watched over the last 30 years the gradual manner in which our regulatory agencies have been largely co-opted by the corporations that are mostly profit motive. Now there's potentially some hope. There's a woman by the name of Lena Khan, who I think is running the FTC, and she understands. She's the kind of person that would make you optimistic. But in general, Leviathan and corporate America are together on this. And so I think the only frameworks that can, I think people that have a strong view around what it means to be human, what humans are, what our purpose is, we must not just talk about these things, but inhabit these spaces. We must exist in the firms, the big tech firms that are controlling the technology. We must inhabit the regulatory spaces even, because if we don't, then I just think that the profit motive will largely be the thing that governs all of this, and that won't go well for us in the long run.
So thank you, John. I share your concerns that corporations are not going to be able to enforce any values, and if government is going to try to help, they're probably going to make it worse. So we need a third way. Personally, I do not believe it's going to come from faith, but you never know.
Where would you want to?
That's what I was going to get to. I think it has to come from a new culture, and let me tell you what I mean by that. Let's say you're all professors. Make it something that you can relate to. Let's say your college enacts an honor code, don't cheat, and you put that in the books. Unless that is like lived by the students, like they really feel that, that that's their value that you don't cheat. That is just toothless. It's not going to work. But if you could create a culture where you have a new value interacting with these new entities, they're going to be walking among us soon. I'm not sure what those would look like yet, but I think it will have to be a cultural solution for this to have power, you know. And sometimes it happens. The subculture of artists already are very anti-AI. I'm sure you've seen that, right? Because they're like, you're basically shunned. If you use AI, you're like shunned by the rest of the artists. Right. And maybe for good reason. If Gen AI had been alive around in the, in the Renaissance, we would have not had any new music because of the tyranny of the training set. There would have been no music styles because the AI can't invent those.
Yeah. So I think we have time. Trevor, do we have time for one more question before we go to?
I think so.
Okay, great.
I think 9 minutes.
Right, okay, great. So I want to follow up on that then, because what are the values that we need to be talking about? And how do you imbue that? How do you create that culture?
What do you mean?
Everybody,
that's
but
the
you
discussion.
too. Right.
No. That's the mission statement.
Right.
We are going back to the tables to develop these values and what they will look like. We're going to crowdsource it.
Can you give us some starters?
I'm not sure. Let me think about that.
Okay.
Maybe John.
John has
I think this is a wonderful room, and it's a wonderful event because these are the conversations that have to happen. All my friends who are in big tech or in the regulatory world, I say to them, and who share my, quote, values, I say to them, this is the greatest opportunity for the Christian witness in my entire life. AI, the development of AI. And the reason why is because when you peel back every layer of the onion, there are two things that are absolutely at the foundation of what is going to govern how we think about AI in our society. It's what does it mean to be human? Pascal touched on a lot of this before, but what really does it mean to be human? And what is reality? What is human? And what does it mean to be human? And what is reality? In rooms at Google, OpenAI, at Anthropic, and presumably in the regulatory agencies and all corporations that are thinking about this conversation's coming up. And so one way or another, we're going to have to answer those questions. We're going to have to refer to some deeper principles. It can't just be the free market will decide. It can't just be those people over there will designate it to these experts over there. This is infecting all of us. And so we all have to somehow participate in this conversation and infuse these spaces. And it could be a professor that is talking about this stuff with their students in a way, and that student becomes a lead engineer at a place like Anthropic or OpenAI or wherever it may be. And then they carry some of that DNA about what it means to be human, what is reality into that conversation, and does so in a way that actually takes into account human flourishing.
So before we go to the table conversation, can I have you all give me a definition of what you think it is to be human? Like, can I have you kick that off?
How bold can I be with this? I am informed by several thousand-year tradition. The scriptures say that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. What it means to be human, according to the Orthodox Christian tradition, is to follow this Messiah. His name is Jesus. And to the best that we can, to mimic or otherwise uncover how our life mimics the life of Jesus and thus fits into the biblical narrative.
So what values are those then?
So the values, people with power must use that power for the sake of others and in the service of others. That's like very simple one, right? I could go on and on, but I would put that as the principal one from a societal perspective, is that if you have power, if you have influence, it's very clear to me that the Christian gospel says that that must be used in the service of others, and in particular, in the service of the least of these.
Yeah, so I can't help you with an Orthodox Christian interpretation. I don't know enough about that, but it sounds very interesting. In my opinion, a human has a dual nature, actually. There is certainly a spark of the divine in the human, right, that they can embrace. But there's also a more base animal nature that they could, like, you know, be taken in by. And which one wins kind of depends on the individual human, which may be the point of an individual life. But on the divine side, I do believe that humans are the agents of logos. And so as such an agent, you can do something, if you take it seriously, that AI cannot do. And that is infuse reality and what happens with meaning. Because to the robot, nothing means anything. There's no meaning. Like, for instance, these robots that win the chess game, they don't really care if they're winning or losing. They only care because of the reinforcement loading, but they don't even understand what it means to win or to lose. So anyways, I think your responsibility is to infuse the world with meaning as an agent of logos.
Okay. So the question was that the regulators don't have the expertise or the spine to do what needs to be done. Are you concerned?
I have seen more spine in a snail. So yes, I'm very concerned about that, which is also why I think the answer is not going to come from the corporate nor from government or from regulators. It has to come from culture. We had a very interesting discussion at our table where we need to create a new culture of an AI-aware culture. It goes into misinformation and disinformation and deep fakes and all of that. You know, it has to come from the culture.
Can I be slightly more optimistic? Because I do share the general concern. So I was giving not this exact talk, but an adjacent talk at Harvard Law School a couple weeks ago. And here's one thing that's interesting. So I've been in the community of business people and entrepreneurs, and for most of the last 25, 30 years. And in principle, I was always encouraging the people that I perceive to be the most high functioning and high capacity to build businesses and organizations, because that was one of the principal ways that we can demonstrate the gospel, and it's one of the principal ways that we can bring about the world that we want to see. In recent years, literally since November of 2022, when ChatGPT came into the world, there's now an increasing number of high capacity, high functioning attorneys who are talking about careers in the regulatory domain. This was never, like 10 years ago, nobody would have even thought to bring that up in the kinds of rooms that I'm in. You'd be like, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to do a dead end thing like that? Go join a startup or go join a private equity fund or a hedge fund. But for the first time, I'm seeing high functioning, high capacity leaders saying to themselves, providing a healthy regulatory framework is one of the best, most high impact things we can do today. So perhaps the cynicism that I think I share and that Pascal shares is hopefully something that is in the waters, and there are young 20-somethings that want to address that, because I do think that is a high leverage piece of this picture right now.
Other questions? So the question for people who didn't hear was the avarice underlying AI, not just from a profit standpoint, but also from a climate standpoint. If people are not familiar, well, everyone here at 3 Mile Island, right? Like, everyone hopefully saw that headline about nuclear power, but just the massive amount of energy that is needed to power data centers. This is a big issue in the DC area.
All I can say is, I mean, you're 100% right. Everyone here is aware of the lawsuit that the New York Times filed against OpenAI. Hopefully that sets a precedent. They essentially, obviously, are making the claim that Gen AI has been trained in a way that is basically taking the intellectual property of the New York Times. The company Reddit recently signed, I think, a 9-figure annual deal to provide their data to Google. And so in some sense, though, all of us here, I mean, Reddit, I don't know how many people here use Reddit, but it's basically, it's a social media model where you provide content and you are the product, basically. And so this is, I mean, that's part of the reason why we're having this conversation, is because there's something about the way big tech works, the logic of big tech, whether you want to call it avarice, or the manner in which they scale bits, compute power, memory, storage, bandwidth. They scale these things marvelously fast. And as a result, they're able to just operate at a scale that the rest of us, that's why it just feels so inevitable. We were having this conversation at our table. What should we do? Don't shop at Amazon. Don't go on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You know, don't use Google for search. I mean, think about that for a second. Like, how disruptive would it be? Don't use an iPhone. Go back to a Motorola StarTech from the 90s, right? It feels like so inevitable. And so this is part of the challenge. I don't know. We don't have anything, our incumbent frameworks, our incumbent logic for how we do this stuff is why big tech has accrued so much power over the last 10, 15 years.
All right. John, thank you, John, almost said it all. There's not much to add. The only thing I would like to add is this point that I made last in the slide, which was, this is not AI, this is machine learning, and it works by scale. Big data, big compute, lots of power. It's not very efficient. It's just not. And so personally, as a data scientist, right, I think the solution will be, which might make these social problems worse, but at least the resource problem better, to find better ways to train the models, to set the weights and things like that. Because right now it's not very efficient. It's just straight up scaling. Big data, big compute, big training, big power, all of that.
So unfortunately, we are pretty much almost out of time. So, we've talked about so many things tonight. We talked about a regulatory framework. We've talked about human dignity. We've talked about values. We've talked about the culture that we want to create. Can I just ask both of you to leave us with final thoughts of what you want everyone to leave here tonight thinking?
Sure. So the way I see it is, and this might be provocative, and it's somewhat what we crowdsourced at the table, is that you might not get paid to do this, but I need you to embrace your human dignity. And here's why. You probably do have a soul, and by having a soul, you're imbued with 3 things that the machine does not have. One is creativity. 2 is this, as I mentioned, this sense of making meaning. And the 3rd one is individuality. That we cannot create another one of you. You are, just probabilistically speaking, highly unique. We can do the math offline, but I'm fairly sure of that. So the idea is I need you to embrace that. And I think then we're going to be okay, particularly if we build a culture around that. If we don't do that, we are facing something like 60% unemployment. There's historical precedent, end of the Roman Republic. It's not good. So we have to do better than that.
My final thought would be the following. We're talking, there's an understandable anxiety in the room about AI and what it means for our collective future. But in a very real way, the antidote to everything that we're concerned about with respect to AI is actually evenings like this. There is something incredible that happens, and it's so rare, sadly, for people to sit around a table, share a meal, and talk to each other. This is the part of the tradition, again, the Christian tradition that I'm from. Jesus did most of his best work in settings like this, around a table, talking to people around food, creating hospitable environments where we can talk to one another as embodied persons across the table, not behind a screen, not even behind a Zoom, much less email or through chat. There's something deeply human about gathering around tables and talking to one another. And I actually believe that the answer to so many of the concerns, and especially the folks in this room, many of whom are leaders who have, dare I say, power and agency to lead by just hosting these kinds of events, might be the best antidote to all the concerns that we have about generative AI.
John, that's a wonderful place for us to end. So thank you. John, Pascal, thank you for being with us.